We often think of World War II survival as a matter of pure grit and firepower. But what if the soldiers of that era actually knew survival secrets that our modern tech-dependent world has completely overlooked? Without GPS, advanced fabrics, or high-tech gadgets, they developed systems that kept them fed, warm, and alive in the harshest conditions imaginable. In this video, you'll discover the forgotten survival methods from the battlefields of the Second World War, techniques so effective they could still save your life today. And at the end, a surprising truth. They may have understood something about resilience that our modern world has completely forgotten. Number 1, the soldier's ember. Fire under impossible conditions. In a world before disposable lighters were common, the ability to create fire was fundamental. But for a soldier, standard issue matches were notoriously fragile. A river crossing or a jungle downpour could render them useless, turning a survivable situation into a lethal one. The solution wasn't a new piece of gear, but a piece of simple ingenuity. They developed a system to make an unreliable tool robust. Soldiers learned to waterproof their matches by dipping the heads in melted wax or paraffin. This created a waterproof seal, but the genius of this technique went even further. Once struck, the wax itself acted as a fuel accelerant, creating a hotter, longer-lasting flame that was far more effective at igniting damp tinder. This wasn't just waterproofing. It was turning a 1-second flicker into a 15-second lifeline. The ingenuity didn't stop there. When matches were gone, they turned to the refuse of battle. A wad of cotton pulled from a uniform and stuffed into a spent rifle casing with a bit of grease became a perfectly waterproof fire starter. When needed, the soldier could pry open the casing, fluff the cotton, and it would catch a spark from even the weakest source. The genius wasn't just in seeing trash. It was in seeing a life-saving tool. For us today, when a high-tech lighter gets waterlogged, this forgotten technique could be the difference. A few minutes dipping matches in candle wax at home creates a fire-starting system more reliable than many expensive gadgets. What makes this genius isn't that it worked back then, it's that we've forgotten it now, when we might need it most. Number 2, the casing purifier. Water from the battlefield. On the battlefield, the most lethal enemy was often invisible. In any theater of war, from the Pacific to Europe, disease was a threat as deadly as any bullet, and contaminated water could incapacitate an entire unit. Official purification tablets could be lost or run out. In those moments, a soldier had to rely on his wits. One field expedient method shows this mindset perfectly. It represents the principle of turning the detritus of combat into a tool for survival. A spent rifle casing could be repurposed into a rudimentary water filter. The technique required a basic understanding of natural processes. A piece of cloth was pushed into the bottom of the casing to act as a stopper. Then it was layered with fine sand, crushed charcoal from a fire, and another layer of sand. Like when suspect water was poured through, the sand would filter out sediment, while the charcoal would absorb many organic contaminants and compounds that cause bad taste and odor. What dripped out wasn't perfectly sterile and should be boiled if at all possible, but it was significantly safer than drinking directly from the source. In a situation where you couldn't make a fire, this method could make the difference. For us today, the principle is the same. A plastic bottle with the bottom cut off can become a larger, more effective biofilter using the same layers. This wasn't just a clever trick. It was the art of using the earth itself to meet a fundamental need. A lesson as true today as it was then, is true today as number 3, the multi-tool mindset. The helmet as more than a helmet. Long before the modern multi-tool, World War II soldiers mastered something far more profound. a multi-tool mindset that turned every piece of limited gear into a source of infinite solutions. The perfect symbol of this was the standard issue M1 helmet. Its primary purpose was stopping shrapnel, but it was rarely just a helmet. The steel shell became a basin for washing. It was a bowl for collecting rainwater. Placed carefully over a fire, it could heat rations or boil water. And in a desperate moment, its curved edge could be used as an entrenching tool to scrape out a shallow foxhole for cover, an improvised use when the standard issue shovel wasn't at hand. One object provided protection: a water vessel, a cooking pot, and an emergency digging tool. This philosophy extended to everything. A bayonet was a utility knife, a can opener, and a probe for detecting mines. A rifle sling became a tourniquet or cordage for a shelter. This wasn't just a series of clever tricks. It was a fundamental shift in thinking. It was about seeing the properties of an object, its material, its shape, its strength, and applying them to the problem at hand. For modern preppers who believe a specific tool is needed for every task, this mindset offers something remarkable: a way to become more resilient by understanding that the tool's prescribed function is merely a suggestion. Its true potential is limited only by your imagination. Number 4. The Dakota fire hole. Fire without a trace. For a soldier behind enemy lines, fire was a paradox, a source of life that could also be a death sentence. The smoke and light from a conventional campfire was a beacon, inviting disaster. The solution was an ingenious method of fire construction that maximized heat and minimized its signature, a technique known today as the Dakota fire hole. While its principles are ancient, they were invaluable for those who needed to survive invisibly. This wasn't a fire you built on the ground. It was a fire you built in it. The construction is a model of elegant physics. A foot-deep chamber is dug for the fire itself. A short distance away, a second, smaller hole is angled down to connect to the base of the first, creating an air intake tunnel. When the fire is lit, the rising heat creates a powerful draft, pulling oxygen through the tunnel directly to the base of the fuel. This creates an incredibly hot, efficient burn. Wood is consumed more completely, which is the key to its near-smokeless operation. Smoke is simply unburnt particles. The fire's flames are concealed below ground, and with little smoke, it's difficult to spot day or night. For the modern camper, this is the ultimate leave-no-trace fire. When you're done, the holes can be filled in, leaving almost no sign you were there. This wasn't just a way to hide. It was a sophisticated application of physics that created a superior cooking fire, protected from the wind, using less fuel. Number 5, the debris hut. The invisible shelter. In the vocabulary of survival, warmth is life. For an isolated soldier, hypothermia was a constant and silent threat. Often, building a fire was simply too risky. The answer lay in a primitive but profoundly effective shelter that required no tools, no fire, and no gear: the debris hut. It is the ultimate expression of using nature to protect you from nature. The shelter works by trapping air, the essence of all insulation. The construction begins with a sturdy ridgepole propped up at one end. Smaller sticks are leaned against it, creating a ribbed A-frame skeleton. Then, the most critical part: piling on massive amounts of dry, fluffy debris, leaves, pine needles, ferns, until the frame is buried under a layer at least 2 to 3 feet thick. An effective debris hut looks less like a shelter and more like a giant pile of leaves. The inside is also stuffed with the same insulating material. The soldier would crawl in, pulling a plug of leaves to seal the entrance. Inside the dark, cramped space, his own body heat, equivalent to a 100-watt light bulb, would slowly warm the trapped air. Even with outside temperatures below freezing, the interior could rise to a survivable level. This wasn't just about building a shelter, it was about creating a passive heating system. For the modern hiker, knowing this technique means you carry the ability to survive an unexpected night out at all times, a system that works when all your modern gear has failed. Number 6, the sensory compass, navigation without a compass. For a downed pilot or a lone scout, a compass was a precious tool, but it could be lost, broken, or rendered inaccurate. Survival then depended on an older, more deeply human form of navigation, turning the environment itself into a map. The principles are based on the predictable patterns of nature. The sun's path from east to west can be tracked with a stick and its shadow to find a reliable directional line. At night, the stars provided an even better map. Soldiers learned to find Polaris, the North Star, or use the Southern Cross to find south. But sensory navigation goes deeper. Prevailing winds often come from a consistent direction, and their effect can be seen on trees, which may have more growth on the downwind side. Plants also offer subtle clues. While the old saying, moss grows on the north side of a tree, is a dangerous oversimplification, there's a kernel of truth. Moss favors cool, damp conditions. In the northern hemisphere, this is more common on the north side of an object, which gets less direct sun. By observing this tendency across an entire area, not on a single tree, and combining it with other signs, a general orientation could be found. For today's hikers, dependent on electronic navigation that can fail, this medieval technique offers something invaluable: a navigation system that works when batteries die, using the one instrument you always have with you. Number 7, the soldier's last resort, the pocket survival. Kit war is chaos. Plans fail, gear is lost. In these moments of ultimate uncertainty, survival often came down to the smallest items a soldier carried on his person. This was the soldier's last resort. The Pocket Survival Kit, a masterclass in minimalist utility. These kits, often housed in small tins, were a hedge against total disaster. They were built on the ruthless practicality of addressing the core priorities: fire, water, shelter, food, and signaling. A typical kit's philosophy was centered on multi-purpose items. Fire was paramount, meaning a few waterproof matches. For shelter and food, a length of cordage, like fishing line or snare wire, was critical. It could be used to catch fish, snare game, or as thread for repairs, with one of the few needles included. A needle could also be used to suture a wound, or even be magnetized and floated on a leaf in water to act as a makeshift compass. This philosophy is the direct ancestor of the modern everyday carry kit. The principles are just as relevant today. Building your own kit in a small tin is a fantastic exercise in preparedness. It forces you to think critically about priorities and versatility. This little tin is not your primary gear. It's the kit that's still in your pocket when your main pack is gone. It is the quiet acknowledgement that the world is unpredictable and that true readiness begins with what you carry with you, always. We often look back at this era with a sense of superiority, armed with our advanced technology. But after exploring these forgotten techniques, perhaps we should ask a different question. Who is really more vulnerable, them or us? World War II soldiers didn't just survive. They developed sophisticated systems that worked with available materials and natural processes. They didn't fight nature. They aligned with it. Every technique reflects a deeper understanding of how the world works when stripped of modern infrastructure. They didn't have to learn survival skills. They lived them daily. Today, we've traded resilience for convenience. We've exchanged knowledge for information. And in doing so, we may have become more fragile than our ancestors in ways we rarely acknowledge. The most powerful World War II survival technique wasn't any specific skill. It was their integrated approach to life. Nothing was wasted. Everything had multiple purposes. This wasn't primitive thinking. It was systems thinking at its most sophisticated. So the question isn't whether these techniques still work. They do. The question is whether we're humble enough to learn from them. Because in a world of increasing uncertainty, the most dangerous thing might be our modern arrogance.